This week I read some articles about the Rings of Power, and this one quote from the showrunners really, really bothered me. I've been following Amazon's foray into Middle-earth since The Rings of Power was first announced, which of course was not first The Rings of Power and might well have been a young Aragorn TV show, but we won't get into that right now because I have this one quote that surprised me in a really bad way. And maybe you missed it. It's kind of a throwaway line from the showrunners, Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne. But after all this news and after all the disappointments that I've seen in how they're portraying the Second Age and how they're compressing Middle-earth and how they're changing characters and how they're adding new characters and how they're focusing on their new characters, this one quote surprised me because it encapsulates their entire attitude toward the show. And I don't think they realize it because I think it's a marketing point, and I think the marketers told them to tell it this way from Amazon. So let's get into that quote. This is from J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, the showrunners, right there. You see them on the left. And this was when they were asked about, at Comic-Con at Hall H, this is when they were asked about, okay, so what about the Hobbits? Why is there a Hobbit story in the Second Age? And J.D. Payne, one of the showrunners, said, well, it's actually technically not a Hobbit story. It's a Harfoot story. And a Harfoot, that's their way of getting around the whole idea that they're telling a Hobbit story, because I don't think they were allowed to tell a Hobbit story, so they're renaming it a Harfoot story, which is completely disingenuous because Tolkien calls Harfoots hobbits, just a kind of hobbit. That's like calling a Chihuahua something different than a dog. There's still a dog. A Harfoot is still a hobbit. Doesn't matter. Okay, anyway. And so Tolkien doesn't say anything about Harfoots not having done anything amazing in the Second Age. The argument from silence that works so well in every debate. Sigh. He sees it as hobbits. He sees it as hobbits before the Third Age didn't do anything impressive. So we felt we had license there to tell a good Harfoot story. And then Patrick McKay jumps in and says, it was really important to us from minute one that what makes Tolkien's tone unique and special is the blend of all these cultures and what each of them bring to Middle-earth. Shorthand for saying they couldn't tell a story without hobbits because it was the special blend of hobbits that they had to bring into Middle-earth to bring back what Peter Jackson had done. A nostalgia bait, essentially. And what each of them represent, the underdogs and the smallest people being able to do great deeds, which was simply the story of the Lord of the Rings and not the story of the Silmarillion or the Second Age or the rest of the Third Age. We could not imagine a version of this show that didn't have a version of that in some form. Well, their imagination is pretty small then. And we went deep into the text to find it, and we think there's a beautiful, wonderful story there that you guys are really going to love. So what is the line that bothered me so much this week? And this comes from when we were looking at it in our episode of Window on the West, the podcast that I do with my friends and fellow Tolkien addicts, Michael Grumbine and Dan Coates. You can check it at windowonthewest.com. But it's the line, and we went deep into the text to find it. That is absolutely amazing because it is literally right up here where they say, Tolkien doesn't say anything about Harfoots not having done anything amazing in the Second Age, right? The argument from silence that if Tolkien doesn't say anything about it, they can do it. But somehow they figured this out by going deep into the text. That's a complete disconnect. There is no way that they can go deep into the text if Tolkien didn't write about it. The depth of hobbits in the Second Age is pretty much non-existent. And so when they say they're going deep into it, there's no reason for that. It's a talking point. They've never quoted anything from Tolkien that proves there are hobbits in the Second Age. They never quoted anything from Tolkien that gives them license to create these characters that we know nothing about and make them focal points of their entire show. But to them, they've convinced themselves that they're going deep into the text, that they can easily find license because Tolkien didn't say it. And so because Tolkien didn't say it, they have license, but somehow they're going deep into the text. This disconnect drives me bananas because it is illogical. It's them lying to themselves and all the rest of us. And it will make for something incredibly non-Tolkien. It makes me think of their other quotes. So when asked in other ways of like, well, how are you creating these other characters and how are you creating this world? J.D. Payne said, so one, we always go back to Tolkien, and two, when Tolkien was silent, we tried to invent as Tolkienian a way as possible. And then Patrick McKay says, oh crap, we didn't say go back to the book. We didn't mention that we were going to the book. Let me cover for JD. Go back to the book, go back to the book, go back to the book. They are a little bit like Laurel and Hardy in this situation because they know that they've created something that doesn't exist. But they have to convince everybody who knows Tolkien that they're going back to the book. But have you ever had them give you a quote about where they went back to the book? Have you ever heard them say in an interview that here's where we got this this character comes from this here, and Tolkien wrote about this, and so we did it this way? The silence from their knowledge is pretty impressive. So did they go back to the book? No, they didn't go back to the book. The book was there. They didn't have license to that book anyway, that book being the Silmarillion or Unfinished Tales or the Histories of Middle-earth. They had license to the appendices. And because of the gaps, they convinced themselves to invent as Tolkienian a way as possible. Okay, this word is bothering me, Tolkienian. How about invent as Tolkien a way as possible? We don't have to add that additional suffix there. So are they going back to the book? No, they're not going back to the book. Is there depth into the text? No, they're standing in a slight puddle and they keep pouring water into this puddle to make it a pool for themselves, and it's all their own making, right? They're swimming in their own story because they believe, as told to, I believe it was Vanity Fair, we're going to write the novel Tolkien never wrote. We're going to put ourselves on the same pedestal that he was at. And they won't be able to do it. So that just bothered me this week. It really, really struck me because they're lying. They've lied to themselves. I think they've convinced themselves that they're going back to the book. But nothing I've seen convinces me that they've ever gone back to the book. That they and in these phrases where they are inventing Tolkien, right? They are saying that, well, Tolkien didn't say it, so we have license to do it. And in any argument, that's a losing proposition. Those are my thoughts. Oh man. If you like what you hear, I'd love a like, I'd love a subscribe, a share, right? I want people to know there are Tolkien fans out there that love Tolkien and love what he wrote. And, you know, you can also love other things, right? You can love Peter Jackson's, and you may even love The Rings of Power in a way, but Tolkien is where we go. His original words, the way he wrote, the words that he wrote, the world that he created, it is beautiful. It is the vision of an incredibly talented man who spoke to our hearts. And I want the world to know that. So like, subscribe, and if you really want to get deep into Tolkien, listen to our podcast, Window on the West, with Michael and Dan. We really get deep into the Silmarillion right now, and we would love for you to follow us there too. Thanks a lot. See you next time.